Hello and welcome to Ranks FC. We're back here on YouTube Wednesdays to talk today about Mykhailo Mudryk, who signed for Chelsea this weekend under the noses of crosstown rivals Arsenal. My name is Jack Collins and I will be your host today, and I'm joined by the one and only Rank God, Mr. Sam Tai. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Very nice of us, wasn't it, to not discuss Chelsea signings for the third straight week on the podcast, but we felt so bad. We've conditioned our audience now. There must be so many Chelsea fans expecting the earth of us. We thought we'd jump back on YouTube and talk about Modric in a bit more detail. Obviously, we've got the data viz from the 23 toolbox to support our points, as we have done over the last couple of weeks with our Juventus conversation, with our Enzo Fernandez conversation. It's a really nice way of visualizing these players, and we've got some good stuff for you today on Modric.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, there has been a Chelsea focus, I think, on the pod and on the channel as well over the last couple of weeks, but they've been the ones making the big moves in the transfer market so far. And if Mykhailo Mudryk had signed for Arsenal, we'd be doing this exact same piece. The front would have been red rather than blue. So that's where we've got to on this. That's where we're looking at. And look, let's talk about Modric and as the deal, right, before we get into the data, because this is a deal worth around 100 million euros, which was Shakhtar's valuation of the player. 70 million euros in fixed costs. That's about 62 million pounds. 30 million euros or 26.5 million pounds in add-ons. It's a 7.5-year deal with a 12-month option, if you like. And then there is the fact that he's on.
It's a good job they got that option, isn't it, Jack? So really, if they didn't get that option in there, they'd be really concerned. Have we got him tied down for long enough? This follows Badia Shields' 8.5-year deal. Reece James got 6 or 7 years.
I think Badia Shields was the same, was it not? Was it not 7.5 with an option?
May have been that, yeah. They're going crazy. I mean, look, it's clearly for FFP reasons.
Yeah, we should point that out.
Yeah, well, they're amortizing transfer costs. They're spreading the fee out over a number of years. You basically, on your books, you pay this fee over the set number of years that the player is contracted for. So if you sign a very, 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 very long-term deal, you're able to split that transfer fee up into a better annual cost for your books.
It's basically 10 million a year, 10 million euros a year for Chelsea, which is quite sensible if you look at it that way. Yeah. It's sensible if it works out, I think, is probably the easiest way to do it. That 97k a week, though, like, obviously it's not set. Players can ask for raises, they can renegotiate contracts, etc., etc., etc. Fine. But it's lower than both Callum Hudson-Odoi and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Loftus-Cheek is on around 150k a week. And I thought it was interesting that this is a slight change in Chelsea's attitude, perhaps. And you can take this in two ways. One, Clear Lake and Burley are the people that put Raheem Sterling on the money that he's on, but he's an established superstar coming into a side. When Reece James signed his new contract, they gave him over 200k a week. But Reece James is one of Chelsea's most key players, and so that seems reasonable in the time. This is not prohibitive, I think, is probably the interesting thing. If this was not to work out, it's not like someone else couldn't pay this kind of fee or this kind of wages for Modric in the way that perhaps they wouldn't really step up for Reece James. And that's not to suggest that Reece James wouldn't be worth that amount of money. It's just kind of 200k plus a week is a very prohibitive figure. We've seen players stuck in big contracts where no one else is willing to pay that. We've talked in the past about the likes of Gareth Bale, about Isco at Real Madrid, where no one was willing to match the contract offer that they were on, and therefore they were seemingly stuck. This seems like a more sensible solution in that regard.
Yes, it's very weird to see a player transfer for basically 100 million euros or close to it and only be on 97 grand a week, because the two figures aren't really in keeping with one another. Typically speaking, if you move for that amount of money, your 200 is your absolute floor per week. Big wages come with big transfer fees. It's just the way it is. I guess what that means is, and we already know this, but it really brings it into sharp focus, just how unique a transfer this is. Because Modric has been a good player, a very good player for 6 months. And that's about it. Now, obviously, there have been some personal circumstances, and the war has had a massive impact on Shakhtar Donetsk and on Mudryk and on Ukraine as a national team. But Mudryk hasn't really been in the focus for that long. And because he played in Ukraine, he was on about $7,000 a week or something, wasn't he? He was on a very small wage. So 7 to 97 is still an absolutely massive pay rise, and congratulations to him.
It's over €5 million pounds a year. So, we're not talking about small figures here.
But never in the history of football has a footballer been bought for 70, 80, 90 million that was on $7,000 a week. It's just never happened before. Like, these players that get bought for this amount of money are already on loads of money, so then they get a pay rise. This has never happened. So he's getting a massive pay rise, but it's a very strange transfer. And this is one of the reasons why. The other reasons are obviously, Shakhtar Donetsk have charged a lot of money because this is the first opportunity for Shakhtar to make money in well over a year. Their squad has been decimated. Almost all the foreign players have gone and left for free, because FIFA ruled that their contracts were null and void. This was the opportunity for Shakhtar to make money, and they have taken that opportunity. I don't know if Chelsea have partially bought into this because they think it might look like good PR to a point. They obviously think he's an excellent player, but giving Shakhtar 100 million euros after the year they've had, there's a part of me from a cynical perspective that thinks that this is 10% PR. The other 90% of me is like, well, Modric's actually excellent, so fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Before we dig into the stats, I just wanted to bring this up from Nico, and Vincent said the same. Pausing my Ranks podcast to watch Ranks live. Yes. Good morning, boys. Good morning. Okay. Good morning.
Too much. It's too much for me.
All of you. I enjoy it. Hiding you by going to more of you is the same kind of vibe. I enjoy it. The Ranks podcasts are in the description as ever to this show. If you're not watching live, if you're watching on catch up, we'd love you to come and join us over on the podcast as well. But let's get into this, Sam, and let's get into some of Mykhailo Mudryk's stats. This is his radar. So will you just walk us through this?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, first things first. And, we try to be honest here. This sample size of data is not the biggest because we don't have access to Ukrainian Premier League data. That said, he wasn't really a factor in that competition before this season. He really has shot to stardom this season. So I'm not sure how much use that would have been anyway. But this is Champions League data that we have over the last couple of years. And I'll walk us through it, and I'll try to explain what it tells us in terms of how it paints him as a player. So we'll start sort of towards the top left, and we've got accelerations and progressive runs. An acceleration, which is defined by Wyscout, is just any moment in a game where the ball is at a player's feet and they notably up the tempo by basically sprinting. So it is what it says. And he's in the top percentiles for times that he's taken the ball and just sped up, is basically how I'd put it. And then progressive runs are progressive runs. He carries the ball 10, 15, 20 meters and he makes good headway down the pitch. So those two at the top there, top left and right in the north point, I think are probably where we start. He is a runner. He takes the ball, he runs with it. He's very, very fast, isn't he?
Yeah. He's explosively quick is probably how I would put it.
And he's got top end speed too. So he's got that explosion, but then I think he can sustain that speed over 30, 40, 50 meters very, very impressively. So your Grealish has got great burst and he has a powerful stride, but over 40 meters, he will be caught. I don't think Modric will be caught. I think Mudryk in that sense is more like Chiesa. And this is the sort of comparison that we've drawn on the podcast before. A bit of Grealish, a bit of Chiesa. Chiesa for the sustained top-end speed, Grealish for the burst and the hair. We move over slightly to the right as well. Dribbles, attempted, completed. Again, pretty strong. We've got goal contributions, not too bad. Well, very good, really. He has basically been responsible for the lion's share of Shakhtar's offensive production over the course of this first half of the season. Same with key passes. Not much of a crosser. So I think we're already starting to figure out exactly what kind of winger this guy is. He's inverted. He plays on the left. He cuts in on the right. He takes shots. He gets into the box. He has an impact, but don't expect him to be steaming down the line and sending balls into the box.
That's okay, because Chelsea have no one to nod them in anyway. So that's quite useful in many ways. We'll come on to a little bit more now, and we'll come on to his shot map. The thing you see is that he starts on the left-hand side of the pitch, he cuts inside, and he looks to get into the angles which allow him shots. And so we've seen him play on the left of a 4-2-3-1, really, for Shakhtar. And we've seen him play on the left of a front three for the Ukraine when we've seen them play. And so therefore, I think mostly what we've seen is that element. There has been a question, and it's something I've posed myself at times. Do you think Mudryk could become a 9? And I think the answer might be yes in the kind of long run. But right now we're looking at a very, very obvious attacking threat from that left-hand side, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm not as convinced as you on the 9 conversation, but obviously you're throwing it forward a bit, so we can address that in a couple of years. For now, all I would ask Chelsea is that they stick to what he's good at, because he's under enough pressure to begin with, having cost 100 million euros and being like the marquee transfer of January. Like, they need to make sure they drill into what he's good at and put him in these positions to succeed. So have him running down the left and have him cut inside. You can see like he doesn't really move over to the right-hand side of the pitch. There hasn't been a single shot from the right-hand side. Maybe that rightmost star could be considered right side, but it's pretty central. He's obviously cut in from the left there. I remember that goal as well. That was in the Champions League. Was it Celtic? Or was it Real Madrid? It was Celtic. And so, yeah, he cut. I know he cut from the left. This shot map is the sort of thing you would have seen from Aubameyang when he played left wing for Arsenal. He clearly has an angle that he's comfortable striking the ball from, and you can see it in the cluster in that corner of the penalty box. So this is Mudryk's sweet spot. Cuts in, has an ability to create a bit of separation, creates a yard for a shot, and has a go.
Yeah, I mean, I think this answers Doug's question. Do we expect he could play on the right through the middle? The answer is probably yes, but I don't think it would get the best out of him. And I think that Chelsea would be wise if they were going to do so to keep him in his preferred side as he adapts to English football. Let's come on to the shot assists. This is interesting because it comes from a slightly different place.
Well, I mean, yeah. So he's feeding the ball from the left into the central areas. So this is good news because he's not a greedy so-and-so. He's not just taking shots and only shots. He's also supplying and moving the ball inside to whoever he's aiming for. Again, they're all coming mostly from the left-hand side. The stars represent goals, so basically that's 2 assists. These shots are all being taken from within the width of the penalty box. That's a really good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, this is something we'll come on to, the creativity aspect of it, because he is not just a high volume shooter. And I think there has been a tendency in maybe some of the clipped up videos, some of the real highlights, real things you would have seen, where it does make Mykhailo Mudryk look like he takes the ball, drives down the wing and gets a shot away. And that's fine because he does do that. But I would say that that's not the only aspect to his game. And there is this element of creativity that exists within him that to create and tee up for other players that I think the likes of Kai Havertz and João Felix will eventually thrive off. Now, he's obviously been playing with a different kind of striker in Artem Dovbyk, who is very much not I'll get your movement going. And he is a player who likes to snaffle around the 6-yard box in the way that we like poacher strikers to do. But he's going to have to adapt here because there's a lot to get to in terms of how Havertz and Felix and the like playing a slightly different style.
I mean, so the issue with having a free-flowing forward line with, positional rotations and things like that is that while it does look amazing when it works, it's really, really hard to put together. And the reason it's hard to put together is because it takes a lot of familiarity and reps between those players. So you can't chop and change the forward line and you can't move them around. You basically have to get them to play together for like a season or two. So they just intrinsically understand each other's movements and can duck and dive and swap. That just doesn't happen overnight. You can't just put 3 attacking, like really good attacking players and ask them to just, swap positions. It's not how it works. Even the Barcelona tridents with Messi in it, it was just repetition and constant repetition of positional rotations and fluidity. So again, for Modric, like you want to get him in this forward line, you want to get him to integrate with Havertz and Sterling and Felix. And on paper, I like it. But I think they need to make sure that he is just put into the right positions here, at least initially, because this is going to be a really tough transition. It's a big, big move. And if you ask him to ghost across the forward line with a bunch of players he's never played before, it will be really, really hard. That said, I can see how over time it will probably work out just fine, because I think he has the ability to do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move into this passes received map. And to a point, I want to answer this question from Jerry, who says, from off the ball, does he make runs into the box? Yeah. Can James pinging crosses will need finishing? I think it's probably worth addressing how this kind of map works and why it's important.
So it's hard to answer Jerry's question because if you're running into the box and receiving a pass, that means that you're on the end of something. Now, for Shakhtar, he's never on the end of something that somebody else has created, because he is the best player on the team. He is the most explosive player and the most creative player. And he's the one that can transition them from defense to attack, run with the ball 40, 50 yards, get a shot away, or create something. So we don't really get to see that, because he's at the epicenter of absolutely everything, because he's by far the best player in the attack. That's kind of what this passes received map alludes to. They will pass to him at any point on the pitch. You've got passes from inside the box. You've got lots collected in his own third, plenty in the middle third. And of course, they can find him high up as well. I like the map. It just shows that he's comfortable receiving the ball up and down the line, no matter what the situation is. He's not someone that you can only bring into play in the final third. He's not someone that only works when he receives deep and runs with it. He can receive all across the pitch. But what this shows you is that they pass to Mudryk at every opportunity. This isn't that many games. This is Champions League last couple of seasons. He's not been in all of these games. He's a high-volume pass receiver over the last 6 months, because Shakhtar know what's good for them, and they know that they need to pass to their best player. That's what this shows.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see this transition. And actually, it takes us onto a nice point of the conversation, in that Shakhtar have been fundamentally a counter-attacking side, right? Especially in the Champions League. Now, in the Ukrainian Premier League, that's a bit different, because obviously the top side, or the top side last season, and are looking good again. I believe they're second in the league right now. So you look at this and go, this is all well and good when you're playing on the counter, but how does that stack up when you change that into a system, which Chelsea, I think, are eventually going to get to, where they are dominant? Now, there have been questions about whether this is a transfer for right now or one for the future. And as they said, for the future, yet the future never comes, which I thought was an interesting point. But I actually think that right now, Chelsea could do with a player like Modric and could utilize his talents. Now, whether they actually do this and they utilize that explosivity is a slightly different question, because I think Potter will eventually try to bring some balance and kind of control into this side and get them into a team who are happy to control the ball in the opposition third and look for those moments. But right now, Chelsea look most dangerous on the counter. And I think we saw that. I saw it in the flesh, obviously, at Craven Cottage a couple of weeks ago. Well, last week, actually. I don't know what I said a couple of weeks ago. When they played Fulham, where the big danger were Felix, before he got sent off, and Havertz over the top, that actually allowed Chelsea to get into these dangerous positions. And Mudryk actually feels right now like he's a player that can actually utilize how Chelsea's chaos is currently expanding. And so I suppose in that regard, it makes sense to bounce onwards to his Ukrainian Premier League statistics. Now, as we said at the top, these aren't as detailed as we would like. There's no XG, there's no XA, because we simply don't have those statistics. But what you can see, I think, in this season in particular, as he has stepped up into a main man in this side. Last year, kept out the side at parts by Manus Solomon, who played in a very similar position, who drifted into the 10 at times. Since his departure in the summer, Modric has kind of seized that opportunity with both hands, I think, both domestically and in the Champions League.
Yeah, it's weird to think, back in June, I was watching Ukraine play Scotland in those final World Cup playoffs, the ones that had already been postponed. And Modric, actually, in these absolute do-or-die games, Modric came off the bench for Ukraine. He wasn't actually a starting player for his nation back in June. And he wasn't necessarily a starter for Shakhtar the season before either, because I remember watching Shakhtar play against PSV in a Champions League qualifier. It's one of the first times I'd seen Cody Gakpo. Was about, a year and a half ago now. And Mudryk came off the bench in extra time or something like that for like 15 minutes. I was like, who is he? Who is he? Like, I really don't know who this guy is. That was my first introduction to him. It's only 18 months later that the man's cost 100 million euros. So he must have been doing something right in the last 6 months to make it so that people feel comfortable in that scenario. And it's the heightened focus on Shakhtar has definitely been a factor. It's the fact that he's managed to have such an impact against teams like Real Madrid and like Celtic and Leipzig. It's these statistics as well. I mean, he's really stepped into this team as the main man, and he's got 7 goals and 6 assists in 12 games. I mean, he's the 3rd top scorer in the Ukrainian Premier League. The goals per 90, the assists per 90 look pretty damn good. And if you combine the 2, goals and assists per 90, he's obviously top of the league. He's the most productive player in that division. So we're trying to answer the question, can he convert to a ball-dominant team, a top side, a Chelsea side that are expected to control a lot of the ball against most opponents? We cannot possibly answer that question definitively, but we do have something to suggest that he's not just an open play, open field ball carrier, someone that can only operate on the counter and whose speed is his only asset. Because what do you think he comes up against in the Ukrainian Premier League every single week? Low blocks, double marking, triple marking, and he still manages to make his mark.
Yeah, definitely. We'll pull that down now and go back to just a conversation. This is from Peter. He said, "Hi guys, just tuning in now, wondering which well-known player is similar to." At the top, we said Fede Chiesa is probably a good person to look at. Now, not necessarily in terms of how polished he is. There is definitely an element of raw ability that is still there. But in terms of what he does on the pitch, Sam, Chiesa remains, I think, the standard we've kind of held him to.
Yeah, I keep saying he's a bit of a hybrid between Grealish and Chiesa, and nothing's deterred me from that comparison. It's not just about the appearance; it's the ability to go side to side, it's the burst, it's the dribbling, it's the drawing of the fouls. But where the Chiesa kicks in is because he can maintain that speed running with the ball over 30, 40, 50 meters. Like, his top end speed is really, really high. This guy is seriously fast, and undoubtedly, this is why he has ended up costing this much money, because you can do all sorts with a player in terms of coaching, in terms of one-to-one development, but you can't really teach someone to be wicked fast. It's just not really possible. You either have it or you don't. You can maybe add a kilometer an hour on somewhere if you do some serious training, pushing the prowler up and down with 150 kilos over 50 meters. Like, you can do stuff for your lower body, but to run like Modric does with the ball at that speed, I'm afraid it's just natural. And that is why these players end up costing this much money. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I mean, let's work through some of these questions. This from David says, "Is this not a bit of Nicola Pepe vibes?" Which I can accept. You sign a player after an explosive season when they've lit the world alight and spent a lot of money on them. There's definitely a case to be made, but I would say that there is probably a little bit more on this in the fact that the search for him from both Arsenal, who have been doing their research of late. Let's make that clear. Who very much.
If there's one club in the world that want to avoid another Pepe, it's Arsenal.
Exactly. Probably gives this a little bit more vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be upfront. Like, I would not have paid this much money for Mykhailo Mudryk. Like, it's just not something I'd have done. I'm surprised that Chelsea have gone all the way on this one. And I think that Arsenal were correct to draw their line in the sand and say, sorry, but we just cannot offer much any more than this. And I appreciate that, it can be a bit of a flimsy argument to say, well, he hasn't really been around that long, hasn't achieved that much. When you're buying into potential and you're buying into people, that this is what happens. But it's still much further than I would have gone. So let's be clear on that. I'm half with you. The thing with Pepe was, do you remember we sat there and we watched him and we were like, he's good at one thing, but that's it. Yeah, he was only good at one thing. That's probably too general, but he tended to take the ball in a certain position in the pitch and then run at a certain angle towards a certain point on the pitch and shoot. And that was kind of it. Whereas with Modric, you've obviously seen a bit more variance, a bit more inventivity. some of the stuff I've seen him do for Ukraine, where he has looked an awful lot like Grealish. Again, receiving the ball all up and down the pitch in different points. Yeah, I'm not too concerned about this being another Pepe. I think I've seen a lot more from Modric.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. We've got a couple more questions, but this has really amused me from Drew, who's having a field day in the comments, to be perfectly honest with you. He said, Mudryk is like my crush, puts me in her story, then goes out with some rich lad, which really did make me chuckle as we were going through the questions. I'm interested in this from Nadeem, who says, am I the only one who doesn't understand this transfer stash? All of Chelsea's recent transfers, they essentially have 6 times the same player. Where's the logic behind that? I think that when you talk to Chelsea fans, there was a kind of need for an overhaul in the attacking elements of this squad. Now, there are needs for overhauls in a lot of areas of this squad, midfield being the one that stands out, but also, someone who's going to challenge Reece James at right back and be able to cover effectively when he's injured, because he's been injured a lot of late, I think stands out. But you see João Felix come in here. Obviously, Havertz remains a fixture in this team, as does Mount. Now Mudryk's come in. There's also Ziyech, Pulisic. Now, I don't think these players are similar profiles, I would be honest. But I do worry about the fact that Chelsea have way too many wingers, and the fact that there's going to have to be some of them who leave next summer, especially with Christopher Nkunku confirmed to be joining in the summer transfer window.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, this is part of the reason why I'm surprised that they've not only gone for him, but gone to these lengths and to this cost, because numerically speaking, they don't need any players for these positions. But they do have a lot of injuries. And then when you really think about it, half the names you just read out, they might as well move on from. Like, no disrespect to them, but and they get to the summer, they should probably sell Hakim Ziyech, Christian Pulisic, and I could make a pretty strong argument for selling Kai Havertz as well. So there's 3 gone. So therefore, if he's buying Nkunku and you buy Modric, then yeah, okay, I can kind of see it. And Felix is obviously a short-term thing. Again, we question that. We question the finances in that, particularly when he can't play for 3 games. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, on surface value, it's too many people. But this is the beauty of not being in a sell-to-buy position. Like, Chelsea don't have to sell a player to buy a player. They can just buy Nkunku and loan João Felix and buy Modric, and then, figure out how to sell the others later. They're so lucky that they can be in this position. They don't have constraints.
Yeah, in a way that someone perhaps like Liverpool do, who are playing by that kind of sell to buy model. Finta makes this, similar point. If Felix just holding the position in the front 3 that Nkunku will have, are they going to get Modric, Mount, and Havertz used to each other and then add Nkunku in the next season? I would suggest that's probably exactly what they're setting out to do, and using Felix as an incredibly expensive beta test in many ways.
Placeholder
for Christopher Nkunku. I mean, it's an expensive placeholder, is how I would put it.
Oh man, it's like an £11 million loan or something like that. Yeah, it's a really expensive placeholder. I think Fintan, this is a good point. I hadn't really considered this. I mean, actually, I genuinely cannot even begin. Every time I try to think about how Nkunku fits in on top of all this, my brain melts. Like, it sort of just falls in two. And it's because I'm struggling so hard with Chelsea's MO here. And it's so atypical. And what they're doing in terms of adding player after player after player in positions they already have so many. There's so many question marks here, so many unknowns. Clearly a fair few players to walk out the door in the summer as a result of all of this. It's really hard to figure out exactly what the plan for Nkunku is when you're still not quite sure what they want to do with the guy they've already got. But this is a valid point. This is a good idea. Although I'd be half surprised if Havertz is actually around as well, to be fair.
I think he'll stay. And actually it takes us nicely onto this from Nicholas. He says, how would you set up a front three at Chelsea now? I would argue that this potentially has to force Potter into a 4-2-3-1 because I don't think there's enough space. And I think a 4-2-3-1 at Chelsea involves Dennis Zakaria as a big part of that midfield pivot. Not quite sure who sits next to him yet, potentially Kovacic. Kante when he's back, sure. But right now, the way that it looks, it's Kovacic and Zakaria with perhaps Modric, Mount, and Havertz and
one of them,
one of the rest of them. Modric, Mount, and Felix at once he's back from his suspension with Havertz up top. That's where I'm kind of looking at what Potter probably has to do here in order to try and get the best out of these players. But it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but that's probably how I set it up.
Yeah, I mean, you start with what you think you have to do. You have to put Mudryk in, and you have to play him on the left. Mount needs to play. I know he gets a lot of flack from some Chelsea fans, but he's very good and he's very important to a lot of phases. So Mount needs to play, and you think he'd be in the 10 role here. Felix is too expensive now to leave out on a short-term option. Like, if he becomes a rotation option, there was literally no point in any of this. So he plays, and he can play on the right. And that leaves you with the striker question. So then you can just pick one of Havertz or Aubameyang if he's still around. Or
Broja when he
Fofana.
Yeah.
Broja. I mean, I think Broja's out for the whole season.
I thought it was back in May, but I could be wrong.
I mean, he's done his ACL, hasn't he? He's done. But I mean, either way, like, it's like pick one of them up front, whatever you want to do. I think the behind them is what you've basically read out, and then you've got rotation options like Christian Pulisic. It's amazing that he's a rotation option. Yeah, Hakim Ziyech. I mean, they should really sell Ziyech this month, but they don't need to do anything, I guess.
That's it. Right. I think probably on that bombshell, we are going to call this a day. And all that's left for me to do is to say thank you so much for tuning in and watching us here on Ranks FC. Thank you so much for all your questions and comments. Please do go and check out the podcast. The links are in the description. And on Friday, we've got a very special documentary dropping on this channel. We went to Bilbao, and we've made a wonderful film alongside our partners at New Balance and Athletic Club themselves. Some brilliant interviews in there, lots about the city. It's really, really something that we're very proud of. So very excited to drop that on Friday. And with that, we will see you all later on. Take it easy. Peace.